Hi, I'm Mark Burgess, instructor in Rutgers Professional Science Master's Program and president of Blue Focus Marketing, a consultancy focused on marketing strategy, AI in marketing, digital marketing, content marketing, and AI personas to accelerate market research. I'm also a former executive at PwC, AT&T, and McCann. I'm a TEDx speaker and a course author for LinkedIn Learning, where my current course in integrated marketing strategies has generated more than 110,000 learners. Today, my work focuses on helping marketers and organizations understand how AI is transforming customer insights, market research, personalization, and modern marketing strategy while building practical skills that can be applied immediately in the real world. Marketing used to be described with familiar words like campaigns, channels, content calendars, funnels, and dashboards. The words still matter, but they're no longer enough. Today, marketers are expected to understand AI, consumer behavior, personalization, content ecosystems, customer journeys, measurement, and increasingly, how machines influence what people see, trust, and choose. That is why I'm really excited about this conversation. Not because AI is trendy, not because everyone is talking about it, but because this is the moment when the rules of marketing are being rewritten in real time. And here is the opportunity for you. You are not too late, you're not too early. You're learning about the field at the exact moment new playbooks are being formed, which means the marketers who understand these shifts now will be not able to only adapt, but really understand the future of marketing. They will help build it. So, in the next hour, I want you to understand the changes and to help make them visible to you. Let me show you the full landscape first, because when you see the whole map, each individual trend will start to make more sense. Think of this slide as the roadmap for this micro course. These 7 trends are not random topics. They are 7 expressions of one larger reality. Marketing is becoming faster, more adaptive, more data rich, and more AI enabled than ever. When a discipline changes on this many fronts at once, smart marketers start to pay attention because the future rarely arrives in one dramatic moment. It arrives through a series of connected shifts that change what companies value, what customers expect, and what employers actually hire for. So let's begin with the first and the biggest shift of all. We will discuss the new engine underneath modern marketing. This session is not about replacing everything you know. It's about upgrading how you think. We are going to move across a set of connected themes: synthetic personas, content strategy, social media and creator ecosystems, SEO and GEO, personalization, customer journeys, and predictive measurement. Our first section starts with the big shift. This is where the conversation starts becoming about how the entire marketing system is changing. We see that AI is shifting from a point solution to a connective operating layer across the entire marketing system. Many organizations still talk about AI as if it lives at the edge of their business. A chatbot here, a copy generator there, maybe a better dashboard somewhere else. But that framing is already too small. What we are seeing now is AI beginning to connect research, segmentation, creative development, testing, channel decisions, personalization, customer experience, and measurement. In other words, AI is becoming the connective tissue. That is why this matters strategically. The question is no longer, where can we use AI? The better question for marketers: where does AI change how this system works? This is a very different question. Using AI to speed up a task is very useful. Using AI to redesign a workflow is transformative. Now think about artificial intelligence as the new operating system for marketing. Now we move into one of the most fascinating and most surprising changes in marketing, creating synthetic personas. For years, marketers built personas through surveys, interviews, segmentation research, and a lot of synthesis. That work really mattered. It still matters. It helped teams move beyond the customer as an abstraction and start thinking about real needs, real behaviors, and their motivations. But traditional personas also had limits. They were expensive to create, difficult to refresh, and often too static. Many ended up as posters on the wall rather than as tools for live decision making. And that should sound familiar beyond marketing. Organizations love frameworks, but a framework is not actively shaping decisions. It becomes the decor. So the question becomes, what if personas could become more dynamic? What if you could test messages against audience representations before spending real money in the market? That is exactly where the next set of slides goes. So let's look at a specific example of how a traditional persona gets built and what it captures well. So this kind of persona work is still very valuable because it forces clarity. It will ask, who is the person? What do they care about? What pressures do they live with? What media do they consume? And what decisions are they trying to make? A good persona is not just demographics. It is behavioral and psychological. It explains why someone chooses, hesitates, adopts, or ignores your product or your brand. The reason I like slides like this is that they make marketing more human. Behind every segment is a person navigating their goals, constraints, trade-offs, and aspirations. Now let's look at the richer breakdown behind that persona, because this is where marketers find the strategic insight. Notice how multidimensional this chart is. Demographics give us context. Psychographics tell us their mindset. Behaviors show us patterns. Pain points reveal friction points. Goals reveal aspirations. And media outlets reveal where influence actually happens. This is exactly the kind of thinking that great marketers bring to the table. Not just who is the target, but what world is this person living in? And once you understand the world, your message changes, your content changes, your channel choices change, even your offer, even your tone changes. This is one of the most transferable skills a marketer can build. If you can analyze an audience deeply, you become valuable in brand management, consulting, digital strategy, product marketing, analytics, and entrepreneurship. But now the leap. What if AI could help us simulate these kinds of audience responses much faster and cheaper? A synthetic persona is not magic. It is not a replacement for real customers. And it is definitely not a reason to stop doing real marketing research. What it is, however, is a powerful early learning tool. It allows marketers to create a virtual customer representation grounded in research and patterns, and then use that representation to test ideas before going to market. That entirely changes the economics of learning. Teams can explore more ideas earlier in the process at much lower cost. And that matters because in many companies, learning is just too slow. By the time a message gets tested, approved, revised, and launched, the market may already be moving. Synthetic personas give marketers a way to rehearse the market before the performance begins. This is where synthetic personas become really strategically exciting. Before a company spends heavily on media, creative production, or launch planning, it can stress test messaging, offers, objections, and various scenarios. That does not mean the result is perfect. It means the team is smarter before it spends. Think about how powerful that is in a startup, or in a very lean marketing team, or inside a company with budget pressures. The ability to learn before launch is often the difference between confidence and guesswork. And this is also where marketing starts to look more scientific without becoming less creative. Creativity absolutely still matters, but now teams can challenge assumptions faster, refine their thinking, and iterate before real-world exposure. So ask yourself, if you were launching a new brand or a new product, what would you want to test before spending real media dollars? So where exactly do synthetic personas create the most value? This slide shows why synthetic personas are really so valuable. They are useful in strategy and innovation, messaging, creative testing, scenario and journey design, more efficient research, and decision support. In other words, they help marketers ask better questions much earlier. That is important for your generation of marketers because the old model rewarded people who could execute campaigns. The new model increasingly rewards people who can learn faster, interpret faster, and improve faster than ever before. But remember, early stage learning, scenario testing, and concept refinement are not a replacement for real customer validation. Now we move from audience simulation to one of the most visible battlegrounds in modern marketing, content. Today, content strategy is not just about writing blog posts or posting on social media because the calendar says so. Content strategy now includes social media strategy, creator strategy, influencer strategy, responding to trends, and designing for your brand to be found. That is a much bigger job. Why? Because discovery has fragmented. People discover brands through feeds, creators, communities, reviews, short-term videos, AI answers, and cultural moments. So content is no longer simply a communication output. It is a discovery engine. That changes what great marketers do. They do not just ask, what do we want to say? They ask, where will this be seen? Will it be found? And what role does this content play in the customer's decision process? As Steve Jobs once famously said, you always need to ask, why will someone care? That is a much more strategic way to think. So this is one of the most practical applications in this course. AI personas can help marketing teams evaluate tone, framing, message clarity, and creative concepts before production and launch. That really matters because content is expensive, not just in dollars, but in time, coordination, and opportunity cost. If a team can identify weak framing early, it can avoid producing content that was misaligned from the very beginning. Content creation is one of the most compelling use cases for synthetic personas because the value is immediate and very easy to understand. Traditionally, marketers create content, they launch it, and they wait to see what works. By that point, the budget is already spent, the asset is already live, and learning becomes after the decision. AI personas flip that model. Marketers can test tone, framing, messaging, creative concepts, and likely audience reactions much earlier, before production dollars are committed. So creative testing no longer has to be an expensive, occasional luxury reserved for major campaigns. It can become a saleable, repeatable part of everyday content development, helping teams create stronger content, reduce wasted spend, and improves the odds of resonance before anything goes live. Search is changing, and not in a small way. So let's talk about what that means to digital marketers. So traditional SEO was built for search engines, ranking links. GEO, or Generative Engine Optimization, is built for a world where AI systems parse, synthesize, cite, and recommend. That is a profound shift. In the old model, the goal was to get the click. In the new model, the goal may be to get included in the answer. Hence, these new AI systems are called answer engines. They don't just give you a link to click on and send you off to a website. They give you an answer that you're looking for now. That changes how marketers think about structure, clarity, categorization, authority, and content design. And here is why marketers should care. This is one of those moments when the new rules are still emerging. That means there is a career advantage in learning early. The marketers who understand GEO before it becomes routine will have language and instincts that professionals are still developing. We might ask, what happens to brand strategy when the customer may decide before ever visiting your website? And that brings us to a much bigger disruption in the funnel itself. For decades, the model was fairly straightforward. You build awareness through media, capture demand through search, send people off to websites, help them compare and convert. Now, conversational AI is interrupting both stages at once. A consumer can ask a chatbot, get a curated answer, and make a decision without ever visiting the brand site at all. That means brands are no longer competing only for attention. They are competing for inclusion in mediated answers. This is why I use some provocative language here. The traditional funnel is under attack, not because the customer journey disappears, but because the old linear assumptions are no longer hold. The goal is not omnipresence, but strategic presence, where decisions are made and where trust is built. For years, brand trust has been eroding, and regaining that trust is a primary goal for marketers. This slide includes some thinking by Neil Patel, a search and digital marketing expert. All right, first, match the decision code of the platform. TikTok works very differently than Amazon. YouTube works differently than ChatGPT. Second, understand that validation increasingly beats visibility. Third, prioritize where you can win with discipline. That is what strategic presence actually means. Not being everywhere, but being credible where the decision is actually happening. All right, now let's discuss the important topic of personalization as a central competitive capability in the age of AI. If AI changes discovery, it also changes relevance. And that takes us into personalization. So let's begin with why this matters so much. So personalization works when brands move from targeting people to genuinely helping them across the experience. This framework comes from a best-selling book, Personalized, written by David Edelman and Mark Abraham. This approach reframes personalization as a promise, not a tactic. Empower me, know me, reach me, show me, and delight me. In other words, help me find what I need. Understand me, reach me well, show me what matters, and create an experience that actually feels valuable. That is a more human way to think about personalization. In the age of AI, that becomes even more important because the danger is that companies use more data and more automation but become less helpful. Great personalization does the opposite. It makes the experience feel more relevant, more useful, and more respectful. Today, personalization is a critical differentiator for brands. All right, so let's discuss why personalization is so important. The logic here is very straightforward. When people feel understood, they engage more. When brands reduce friction, trust seems to grow. When recommendations are relevant, conversion improves. For example, Netflix keeps people watching by reducing choice overload. Amazon makes shopping easier through its personalization recommendation engine. Sephora increases relevance through guided selection. The more your brand knows about you, the more helpful it can become. But the larger point is not just these examples. The larger point is that customers now expect relevance. What once felt impressive increasingly feels basic. So, which brand actually makes you feel that it understands you well, and which one makes you feel invisible? Most people can only name very few brands they actually trust. So this slide matters because personalization is only as good as the data strategy behind it. Marketers have spent years navigating a shifting data landscape. So zero-party data is what customers intentionally share. First-party data comes from direct brand interaction. Third-party data comes from outside sources and is increasingly constrained by privacy concerns and growing regulation pressure. So in plain language, better inputs produce more credible synthetic personas. Strong outputs do not begin with clever prompting alone. They begin with stronger data, clearer context, and sound judgment about what information deserves trust. That means that the best marketers of the future will not only know how to use data, they will know how to earn it responsibly. So let's start with the basic framework introduced by McKinsey. This model goes through the basic steps of considering, evaluating, purchase, and post-purchase. So marketers need to remind themselves that journeys are lived, not managed. Customers don't wake up thinking, I'm now entering the consideration stage. They're simply trying to solve problems, to evaluate choices, and to reduce uncertainty. So for marketers, the challenge is to meet them well across awareness, consideration, purchase, retention, and advocacy. That requires orchestration, not just content, not just media or email or CRM. It's coordination. One of the reasons classic mapping thinking frustrates many digital marketers is that real decisions rarely feel that neat. People circle back, they compare again, they ask their friends, they pause, they revisit. The consumer decision journey is more realistic because it accounts for motion, feedback, and ongoing relationships, not just one-way progression. That is especially relevant now because AI and distributed discovery create even more looping behavior. The journey becomes much more dynamic, not less. which means that our real job is to reach the right consumer with the right message in the right place and time. So great marketing aligns your message, place, timing, and touch point across the journey. This slide captures the heart of modern marketing in really one sentence. Reach the right customer with the right message in the right place at the right time in their customer journey. So it really sounds very simple based on this chart, but it absolutely is not simple. Because the difficulty is not writing the sentence. The difficulty is coordinating the entire system that makes it true. This is why marketing is increasingly a systems discipline. What matters is not just a good ad or a smart email. What matters is whether the full experience works together. And that brings us to touch points, the moments where a brand is actually experienced. Now, to ensure a consistent brand experience, marketers need to understand brand touchpoints and how they work. Some good examples of brand touchpoints might include a satisfying call with a tech support, discovering a helpful mobile app, or having a rewarding in-store experience. Because brands live or die through the connections they make, we recommend an approach to branding that counters pervasive media fragmentation to enable the brand to focus on the most relevant touchpoints for your brand. So basically, all touchpoints are not equal. This slide gives some examples of touchpoints and my view of the buyer's journey. These touchpoints on the slide are not intended to be an exhaustive list. In fact, there are hundreds. Rather, it shows potential touchpoints that is a very good starting point. So brand touchpoints shape our perception, trust, momentum, and conversion across the journey. For example, a social ad, a review, landing page, a rewards email. Each of these touchpoints will shape the customer's interpretation of the brand. And here's what is really interesting. Customers do not evaluate each touchpoint in isolation. They actually stitch them together in one mental story about your brand. That means inconsistency becomes costly. If the ad promises one thing, the reviews suggest another, and the landing page creates friction, the journey breaks. So great marketing feels coherent across all relevant touchpoints. That's the key. So today, the best content marketers will focus on what we call the 80-20 rule. Essentially, what this means is that brands should focus 80% of their content on helping, informing, educating, or otherwise raising the interest of your customer. The remaining 20% of the content should be focused on your product or your service. When you get these two reversed, instead of informing your customer, you're actually spamming them. So this is one of my favorite visuals in this course because it feels true to how people actually decide now. Today, the customer journey is more like overlapping micro decisions, not a very neat funnel. This is a concept by Neil Patel, a digital marketing expert. So what to click, what to trust, what to buy, what to believe, and who to follow are not sequential steps. They happen very quickly and often across multiple platforms, all within minutes. And here's the big implication for future marketers. Your job is not just to push people through a pipeline. Your job is to understand the psychological role that each platform plays in their decision process. And before we choose channels or content, we need a disciplined way to understand their media habits. So smart channel strategy actually starts with audience understanding analytics, research, experimentation, and platform fit. This slide shows a very practical approach. You define the audience, you use data and analytics, conduct market research, monitor trends and experiment, identify platform preferences. As we talked about earlier, let me highlight market research and new ways to conduct early stage research much faster and less expensive using AI personas. So that sounds pretty straightforward, but the teams skip steps. They choose channels based on habit, imitation, or internal bias rather than evidence. The best marketers are much more disciplined. They combine analytics, research, experimentation, and good judgment. And when this process works well, it changes not just messaging and channel mix, it changes how budgets actually get allocated. So this divider introduces the final section, predictive measurement and evidence-based marketing decisions. So our last section is measurement, but not backward-looking reporting. In the age of AI and marketing, we're talking about predictive measurement. So let's talk about what that means. So predictive measurement helps teams shift budgets from assumption-driven to evidence-based decision-making. Historically, marketers were often asked to report what happened after the fact. Predictive measurement is different. It asks, what is actually driving that performance? And how should we act on that insight going forward? A subject called marketing mix modeling uses historical sales and marketing data to isolate the contribution of different activities and to quantify their impact on results and ROI. The strategic significance here is powerful. Budgets become evidence-based rather than assumption-driven. And that is the leadership issue as much as an analytics issue, because the leaders who win are not the ones with the prettiest dashboards. They're the ones making better decisions with better evidence. So this slide brings the story full circle. We started with the idea that AI is changing the operating logic of marketing. We end with a measurement discipline that helps organizations allocate budget more intelligently, to optimize more consistently, and to understand what is truly working. In other words, this is not just about technology. It's about better informed judgment. So I hope the takeaway from this course is that AI is reshaping marketing at its very core. It is changing how marketers learn, test ideas, personalize customer experiences, optimize their performance, and to make decisions. So during this course, we've explored several key areas driving this shift, including synthetic personas, content strategy, AI-driven search and GEO, personalization and customer journeys, and predictive measurement. Marketing is becoming far more data-driven, dynamic, and intelligent. Brands are being pushed to deliver more relevant customer experiences, faster insights, and smarter decision-making. So I'm reminded of a quote from Ginny Rometty, former CEO of IBM. She said, we shouldn't call it artificial intelligence. We should call it augmented intelligence because it's going to make us smarter. A lot has changed in marketing. AI agents have entered the conversation. Market research is changing. And marketing teams are rethinking content creation, workflows, and the skills they'll need next. The question is no longer whether AI will change marketing. It's how digital marketers adapt. for current and future marketers. This creates a real opportunity. So the future of marketing will belong to people who can combine strategy, creativity, technology, and the very best human judgment. And remember Peter F. Drucker's famous quote, "The best way to predict the future is to create it." Thank you.